have collaborated with a lot of well-known architects, colleagues, most recently Jean Nouvel in the Monad project, Pritzker Prize winner. So I'm going to start by asking you, who are the architects that have inspired you or influenced you the most?
So, thank you, number one, for having me over here. I'll tell you a little short story, if I may. I got the email and the invitation, and my mother-in-law, her name is Tanya Levy, and she says, "You see, if you're gonna say yes, you'll be very well rewarded." You know. So, she's a very sweet woman, and she lives here in Bell Harbor 101. And make a long story short, just coming here and seeing a lot of people who I have not seen in a long time, like Luis Fulop, and people who I normally see when I go to public hearings and presentations. It gives me an opportunity to sit down and think about it and be appreciative. Before I answer your question about the architects, because I came here to this area, Sunny Isles Beach, and it was unincorporated Dade County in 1994, and RK, who owns the shopping center, put me up in his shopping center on 170th Street, close to him. And so it gives me great pleasure to be here. To be inspiration architects, I get a lot of inspiration from a lot of different people. And Jean Nouvel is a great person. He's a very unique individual. I actually started to do originally 87 Park, 8701 and Collins Avenue with Jean. And then Jean had a little bit of a dispute with one of the partners there from Douglas Elliman. And he said, we can't work with him anymore. So then he brought Renzo Piano, who's also very inspirational. And he became the architect on that project on 87. So I brought Jean to the Monad. And so Jean said, you see, I don't need to work on the ocean. I can work on this beautiful building on the bay that looks at downtown Miami. And he is right. It's a great location. It's a great destination. And you have beautiful views of downtown Miami, and nobody has been building buildings. So you see different people have different outlooks. And when you meet these folks who have Pritzker, they're just normal people like you and I. They're put on their pants and one leg at a time every morning, and they're just, very, generally speaking, very humble people. Jean is very humble. Renzo is very down to earth, and Richard Meyer also very down to earth sort of personalities, and they go through the trials and tribulations of life, as we all do on a daily basis. But inspiration. When I came to Miami in the late 80s and I started working in Miami, because there was no work in the late 80s, it was Miami Vice and Scarface days. And we came here, I joined a British firm that was building hotels in the Caribbean. Man, the British West Indies, as they call it. You want to sit down? You'll feel so much more comfortable. Yes. Seamus Levy, we sit. And what happened is that there was no work in Miami per se, so we worked in the Caribbean. And I'll stand up because I'm short and anybody can see me. So what happened is that it's in the early 90s we started to work, and I got pulled into a project which was called Seacoast Towers. And at first they didn't give me the job, they gave it to another architect. I was in my early 30s, and I said, we can't give this young kid a job like Seacoast Towers, it's 1 million square feet. Nomura Bank was financing it. And I went to see the engineer for the building, and he brought me the plans. And the plans, he had the original plans from 1964. I was born in 1962. They were hand-drawn by Morris Lapidus. And Morris Lapidus did the Fontainebleau, Eden Rock, and I found out he also did Seacoast Towers. And that's how I met Morris Lapidus, and I was able to speak to him about his history, which is everything in life. People see all these buildings and they think, oh, wow, it's, he must have had a successful, and he was relegated down by people in the American Institute of Architects who thought of him as a storefront designer from New York. So they wouldn't give him much credit. And a lot of that was also jealousy because he was successful. He got Fontainebleau and Eden Rock, and he did Lincoln Road and other projects. And so he was looked down upon by certain individuals in the American Institute of Architects. So make a long story short, which is interesting and inspiring, back then we didn't have the iPhone or the Blackberries, but we had Yellow Pages. So I opened up the Yellow Pages, and I look for Morris Lapidus, and I pick up the phone, and I called him. And Morris picks up, and he goes, well, if you want to talk to me about my building, you need to come and see me, right? So I went down, and in one of his buildings on the Venetian Causeway, 9 Island, that was his building. I went up to see him. And by then he was alone. He was in his late 80s, and his wife passed away. He had a wife called Beatrice, who he loved very, very much. And I went to see him, and he thought it was kind of unique seeing somebody young. Took him about 3 times to remember my name. And as you get older, you start to appreciate. I'm 55. I'll be 56 in November. When you're in your 30s, I used to see everybody the same as me, but it's not like that. There's a delta between 30 and 45, and between 45 and 55, and 55 to 65. And I saw Morris like my brother. Hey, come on, let's go. So he said, "What are you doing in that building?" I said, "Well, Morris, I want to do a new building next to it." And he says to me, "Well, I'll help you. Sit, relax. It's going to be a long night." He goes, well, tell me what I told him what I'll be doing. He says, well, let me tell you why I wanted to talk to you, right? So this is where people always want something from you. And as long as you can understand that and you can give that to people, then that's like the biggest thing that you can do in life. I don't care if it's your child, I don't care if it's a stranger in the street, but you should always find a way to try to make people. And so Morris said, I did this building in the 60s. I don't like the color on the outside. They painted it this hideous brown color. And I don't like the interior French Rococo that was done by the girlfriend of the owner. I said, I understand. And he said, if you can take care of that for me, I'll be happy to come and speak for you in the public hearing on behalf of this project. I said, oh, sure. I said, what was the original color? He said, well, the original color was supposed to be this sandy color like the dunes, sand dunes, and blue like the ocean, in the tropical blue. I said, all right. And he said, what about the interior? I said, on the interior, I just want you to get rid of French Rococo and give it the modern style that I like. And so he's known for doing like bow tie marble interiors. And just like you come in here and you have modern furniture, he would have liked to have this kind of a style in his building. And that's what we did. And he came and he spoke in the public hearing on behalf, and he was very vocal and he supported. And the project was approved. It was a 44-story glass building next to his building on the backyard. And everybody was in such awe that Morris Lapidus came. And he spoke. And that made the historic preservationists ask me to bring him back to the American Institute of Architects, which we did. And before he passed away, he was very well received and very well acknowledged. So that's kind of my story about inspiration from architects. It's very, Morris is an inspiration because he's uniquely Floridian, transplant from New York. Most of the people in this room were not born here. We were born someplace else. And when we come here, we are lucky enough to have an opportunity by a place like Florida to give us an opportunity. And this space, for example, I came to RK in 1994, and we would have only dreamt or wished to have a space like this with beautiful art and furnishing in it to supply to our clients. Because back we think, oh, this is just natural, this is the way it was, but this is 2018. In 1994, the furniture that people would sell here would be this basically faux med revival, big, boxy, and a lot has changed. And so I'm grateful to have, Bell Spazio here and the furniture and the brands that they have, because it's the next generation. And I think that's marvelous to have here. I met Milagros, right? and she, and with her pink, there she is with the pink jacket, and then just the artwork that is here, and the culture that you have here. Or Miss Levy, to have this evening where people can come and they can have something to drink, and think about culture and art is very, very important and very satisfying to see.